In a time when manufacturers are investing heavily in the EV market, Toyota is doubling down on their hybrid technology, hybrid powertrains, and hybrid lineup. Across the board, you have vehicles that are both affordable and very fuel efficient, such as the Venza, the Prius, the hybrid RAV4, hybrid Camry, hybrid Corolla, hybrid Corolla Cross. The list just goes on and on. But these vehicles are both affordable and very fuel efficient. If you're somebody who is not ready to go in the EV direction, you don't want to deal with charging, you don't want to deal with range anxiety, then buying a hybrid is going to make the most sense and probably will be the best investment for you moving forward. But if you're somebody with expensive tastes, you want an upscale interior, you want to experience the finer things in life, but also have a vehicle that's not going to break the bank and be well over $50,000 or $60,000, that's where the Toyota Crown might be the best choice for you. So in this video, we're going to take a deep dive into the Crown. We're going to take a look at the exterior, the interior, take it out for a test drive, and also see why the Toyota Crown might be the crown jewel in the hybrid segment. Now before we get in this video, I'd like to thank AutoFair Toyota in Tewksbury, Massachusetts for allowing me to do this review. Their link will be in the description below so you can check out their extensive Toyota inventory. Also, before we get started, make sure to hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell so you're notified every time a new video goes live on the channel. And so, without wasting any further time, let's get right in this review. Toyota has been no stranger to pushing hybrids into the market, as they sold electrified vehicles for well over 2 decades. But now in 2024, Toyota's decision-making appears to be very deliberate, as their commitment to hybrid technology is stronger than ever. And now with the Crown, they have an extensive array of cars and crossovers that tailor to almost every segment in the automotive industry. Being the unofficial flagship sedan for Toyota, the Crown sets a tone for the immediate future of the brand, as the new Camry will only be sold as a hybrid here in the United States, leading many to question whether Toyota is taking a huge risk by not being as publicly active in the EV market like their competitors. Starting off with pricing, the model we have today is the Limited, coming in at just under $46,000. And when you consider that not only is the Crown supposed to be the premium sedan in the lineup, but also a luxury-like modern hybrid vehicle, its relative affordability is quite compelling in 2024. While the Crown nameplate had been absent from the North American market for 50 years, its return most certainly turned heads, as the 16th generation attempts to push the envelope in ways never seen in this segment before. In regards to the Avalon being replaced by a completely different sedan entirely, fundamentally speaking, Toyota maintained the dimensions and size of their flagship sedan, but with a slight twist, as its lifted suspension and elevated cabin gives this vehicle crossover-like qualities. Where the Crown has received admiration is with the exterior design, as Toyota's hybrid lineup now consists of sleek and cutting-edge vehicles that look appealing and upscale. Taking some cosmetic elements from a few vehicles in the lineup, this hybrid sedan does resemble an EV like the BZ4X, but has the style and demeanor of the Prius in a more posh suit. From the striking body lines to the full LED headlights and contrasting accents, the Crown certainly makes a fashion statement, one that puts it in a category of its own. And while manufacturers have experimented with this formula in the past, the Crown doesn't present itself as a half-hearted effort to attract buyers in this market. Moving over to the side profile, the XLE and Limited will be sitting on 19-inch alloy wheels, but this trim does offer 21s, which not only changes the silhouette of this car, but also may negatively affect ride quality. Since the Crown has electric motors, there's a decent amount of weight to the chassis that provides an EV-like driving experience. Since the suspension is tuned for luxury, the Crown glides over the pavement in ways that not even conventional luxury sedans can replicate, giving the driver and passengers a plush and cushioned ride. You'll have body color matching side mirrors with turn signal indicators to go along with blind spot detection for added safety. Then coming around to the back, this sedan has a classy rear fascia with an illuminated light bar that runs the length of the final third. While not a traditional sportback, The sloping roofline gives the Crown an aerodynamic design that inspires you to take a second look as it passes you by on the road. Further appealing to shoppers this decade, the Crown has a cutting-edge road presence that does differ greatly compared to the Avalon it's replaced, and in all honesty, should be seen as a completely separate entity rather than a successor to a reputable nameplate. Under the hood for the XLE and Limited, the Crown is powered by a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder engine and 3 electric motors to produce 236 horsepower and 332 pound-feet of torque, and both trims receive a continuously variable transmission. For those who are power-hungry, the Platinum's 2.4-liter turbo 4-cylinder that receives 340 horsepower and 400 pound-feet of torque may satisfy your cravings for speed, as its 5.10 to 60 time is quite brisk for a car in this class. With our model being a Limited, performance was more than sufficient for suburban driving, and this motor could easily manage merging onto highways and passing slower drivers. In fact, for daily commutes, it should more than meet your expectations and demands, especially for a fuel-efficient sedan such as the Crown. Not receiving as much attention due to the list of features and incentives, all-wheel drive does come standard across all 3 trims, further enticing you to go in the hybrid direction. And if that wasn't enough, when it pertains to fuel economy, you're looking at right around 42 miles per gallon in the city and 41 miles per gallon on the highway. Hopping inside, the Crown quickly impresses with a cabin that's unique to the Toyota lineup, but resembles the interiors found in new Lexus products. While in no way a direct competitor to luxury brands, this hybrid sedan does draw attention when taking a peek into the Crown for the first time. By choosing the Limited, you're greeted by power-adjustable, heated and ventilated leather seats for both the driver and passenger, with the driver's side having 2-position memory for added convenience. Better yet for a futuristic car such as the Crown, to have physical buttons complementing the full digital gauge cluster and large infotainment system makes a great first impression, as buyers are now met with buttonless cabins from rivals. As we've seen from Lexus products, the gauge cluster isn't too customizable, despite the ability to scroll through some vehicle settings and safety systems, which most likely you keep on for peace of mind every time you get behind the wheel. Another advantage with the Limited is the heated leather-wrapped steering wheel, which brings a premium feel to the driving experience. Then as we take a glance over to the infotainment system, you'll have a 12.3-inch touchscreen, with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto compatibility, to go along with the 11-speaker JBL sound system, which amplifies the audio of your favorite music. And as you would with other Toyota products, you can subscribe for onboard navigation. Ultimately, this is the same head unit that can be found across the Toyota family, with a slight deviation compared to the Lexus product line. However, its simplicity and responsiveness will make this a great user interface for those not looking for an in-depth and complicated head unit. While physical buttons are kept to a minimum in regard to the infotainment system itself, there'll be icons placed to the left which will get you to the desired menus efficiently. As always, you'll have a rear backup camera with trajectory, but optional is a top view camera to help you park the Crown. Beneath the screen, you'll find the buttons for the dual-zone climate control, 3-level heated and ventilated seats, AC, and front and rear defrosters. Then as we make our way towards the center console, a wireless phone charging pad will give you a secure place to store your iPhone, and there'll be 2 USB-C inputs mounted on the passenger side. The Crown will also come equipped with a drive mode selector, but as we'll discuss during the test drive, despite there being a sport mode, this sedan is all luxury all the time. For the center storage compartment, there'll be more than enough room for smaller items. And then to round out the front seating area, above will be a panoramic moonroof, which will let in a lot of natural light to the interior. Now moving on to the second row, we're going to sit off on the passenger side. And this seat's been adjusted all the way back and is somewhat on a recline. And I have a good amount of legroom here, which is very surprising and eye-opening to experience. Now, the Crown will give you right around 39 inches of legroom for the second row, which is very respectable for a car in this class and market. Now, in regards to size, though, this isn't a full-size sedan necessarily. Yes, it tops out the sedan range in the Toyota lineup, but it's smaller than a BMW 5 Series. So keeping all of that in mind, this will be more practical than a Toyota Camry, but this isn't a Lexus LS, for an example. So if you're looking for a vehicle that is decently sized, that's not too much bigger than the Avalon that this car is replacing, you're going to love this car, and so will your passengers. Now, design-wise, the Crown does have crossover-like tendencies because it is lifted. It's not like a traditional sedan. But you do get a traditional sedan roofline. However, I think passengers at the height of 6 feet tall won't be hitting their head on the headliner, which is really great to see, even with the massive panoramic moonroof on our model today. Also nothing too, and we experienced this with the Camry, but the Crown takes it one step further, is the amount of shoulder room, which I do think we can actually fit a third person in the center, but let's find out. Now, moving on to that center seat, you are going to have some great placements for your feet. And again, I am genuinely impressed with the amount of room here, because if you do have 3 average-sized adults sitting in the back, I think it could definitely work. The only thing, though, is that because you're in the center seat, you're very close to that headliner, so I wouldn't want to squeeze in a taller passenger in the back. But if you have 3 kids, it could most certainly work. I think it's definitely doable for sure. And then on the driver's side, this seat has been adjusted a bit more further up, and I have a lot of legroom here where I can just relax and enjoy the driving experience. But one thing that really stands out to me about this car is that it kind of reminds me of a Volkswagen Passat, but also a Volkswagen Arteon. And the Crown doesn't compete head-to-head with the Arteon because the Arteon is a bit bigger. But to have this amount of interior space, I think really says quite a bit of what Toyota's trying to do here, because it does have an entry-level luxury-like experience, especially with the interior materials, and also it does feel like a Lexus. And it kind of fills a void that we now experience in the automotive industry, where there isn't a car like this anymore, because Nissan dropped the Maxima, Volkswagen dropped the Passat, Chevrolet doesn't have a car in this market necessarily, and also, of course, we're seeing Dodge move on from the Charger. So the Crown is really, truly in a league of its own, not only when it comes to the powertrain, but also the size and the interior space. Also back here, you do have 2 rear air vents mounted in the center to go along with 2 USB-C inputs. You also have heated outboard seats, which that button can be found on the door panel. And then rounding out the second row seating area, you do get a center armrest with 2 cup holders. Then as we make our way around to the back, obviously you're not going to receive a power trunk for the Crown, but inside, behind the second row seats, you're looking at right around 15.2 cubic feet of room, which would be on par with a lot of vehicles of this size and in its market, but also even luxury mid-size sedans as well, such as a BMW 5 Series or Mercedes-Benz E-Class, and of course, the Lexus ES. Now, compared to the Avalon it's replacing, there's not too much of a difference at all, and in fact, this is slightly better than what we see from the Toyota Camry. I was able to fit all my camera gear today, no problems. It has 2 bags of camera gear, a gimbal box, and a tripod, and still had plenty more room to go grocery shopping after this review. So I think that if you are going on a road trip with the family, you can easily store 8 or 9 bags of luggage back here. And then, of course, with the second row seats folded, you can store longer items in the back of this car. But just like with the Avalon, it's not going to be as practical as a crossover. And if you're somebody who is going to bring that up, I would wait for the Crown Signia, which is the crossover version of the Crown. And I think that's going to be one impressive vehicle for the Toyota lineup. Hopefully that arrives sometime soon, because I can't wait to feature that on the channel. Then beneath the floor mat, you are going to have a spare tire. So if you do encounter a flat on your road trips or travels, you can fix that and be back on the road. And finally, for the moment we've all been waiting for, let's take the Crown out for a test drive. So we're now behind the wheel of the Toyota Crown. Let's take this sedan out for a quick test drive to see how it performs, how it handles, how it drives, how it compares to other sedans of this size and class, but also other hybrids that are on $40,000 to $60,000. Some journalists may disagree with me on this, but I think the Crown is a couple of years ahead of its time, much like the Prius was 20 years ago. There's not a lot of vehicles at around $40,000 to $60,000 that are hybrid only. You either get a gas-powered model with a mild hybrid system, maybe a hybrid variant, plug-in hybrid variant, or you just get a full EV product. Toyota is not skipping any steps here. Toyota is adamant about the fact that hybrid and plug-in hybrid technology really is the future rather than going full EV. And that was a huge gamble and risk, and I think even today in 2024, you can say it still is that risk. But a lot of buyers are not ready to go full EV. They don't want to deal with charging, they don't want to deal with range anxiety. When I got the keys to this car, it showed me that it had 590 miles of range. Theoretically, I could go from Boston to Buffalo and not have to fill up. That is fantastic. That is what we definitely need right now in the market. And while I think we're all looking for an alternative to gas-powered motors, hybrid technology stretches the dollar just a bit more when you are filling up this vehicle on a weekly basis. To get close to 600 miles of range, that's unbelievable. And that, I think, is really what's going to captivate buyers in the long run. Maybe not necessarily with the Crown sedan, but maybe the Crown Signia, which is going to be the crossover version of this car. And I can't wait to film that. I think that is going to be a game changer. That is what's going to really set this market moving forward. And I think we're going to see a lot more manufacturers get into this segment and compete with Toyota. But in the meantime, the Crown is kind of in no man's land. It's in this gray zone where it doesn't necessarily compete with anything. There's no vehicle that you can cross-shop with that you could say, this is a direct competitor to the Crown. And I think that for the Crown to succeed, for it to fully replace the Avalon in the lineup, to see the sales figures reach the same point that we saw with the Avalon, it's all going to come down to really educating the buyer. What is the Crown giving you? Why is it valuable? Why is it a great buy at around $50,000? Because you could go with the base XLE, and that's 40 grand. 40 grand for a car that has a Lexus-like interior, a Lexus-like driving experience, and also a fuel range of 600 miles and close to 41 miles per gallon combined city and highway. You're not going to find that in this market. You're not going to find a car that gives you all of that under one roof. And yet that's what we have here with the Crown. And that's why I have been intrigued with this model and why I really wanted to feature it, because I really truly think there's a lot of people out there who don't get this car quite yet. They understand the Prius, but they don't understand the Crown. And what the Crown is going to usher in is an entry-level luxury hybrid market that is going to effectively make EVs at this price point or just above that maybe not make so much sense to a lot of buyers. Because when you're spending close to $60,000 for an EV with only 200 or 230 miles of range, why would you buy that when you can go with a Crown? And what the Crown is also giving you is a lifted sedan that is somewhat versatile, has crossover-like tendencies when you are behind the wheel, especially when it comes to seat positioning, because I've been behind Accords, I've been behind Sonatas on this test drive, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm pretty high up here, and this car really isn't that much bigger. And yet, I think that's what Toyota's trying to do. They're trying to give you a car that mimics a crossover while still being a sedan in 2024. I think it's admirable what Toyota is doing just to really keep the life cycle of the sedan market going. And again, I think that we're a couple of years away from buyers catching on to what Toyota is giving you here. And the same was most certainly said for the Venza as well, where it's a hybrid-only crossover that slots between the RAV4 and the Highlander. It's no bigger than a RAV4, so buyers are probably wondering, why should I go with the Venza? And yet here we are 5 years later, and we're seeing Venzas all over the place. They become a decent seller in the United States. And I think the Crown is going to have a similar fate. But enough of me rambling on about this car's placement in the lineup. Let's discuss the meat and potatoes and the reasons why you're here to watch this video, which is the driving experience and driving dynamics. When you hop into this vehicle for the first time, it most certainly feels like a Lexus. The interior layout, the dashboard, the center console, this is all Lexus. But better yet, for a car under $50,000, or if you go with an XLE, which is just over 40 grand, you're getting a vehicle that feels like an entry-level luxury sedan, and that is almost unheard of from a mainstream manufacturer, and more importantly for a vehicle that's only a hybrid. Now, when you are comparing this to, say, a Camry or even an Accord hybrid, why would you go with this? Why would you spend the extra money? It's mostly because of the platform. This is built on the same platform as the Lexus RX and Lexus ES. Now, some people will say, price-wise, you could just buy a Lexus. Not necessarily, because with the ES, it's an older car. That car's been around for about 6 years now, whereas the Crown, this is all new. Also, of course, with the ES, you don't get all-wheel drive from hybrid. So with the Crown, all-wheel drive is standard, which is definitely going to draw in buyers who live in the Northeast, live in colder regions of the US, where they will be encountering winter road conditions. And it becomes this all-in-one great package, and that kind of ties into this car's almost crossover-like tendencies, especially when it comes to seat positioning, because you sit pretty high up in this vehicle, where you have a nice commanding feel and presence over the roadways. It does feel like an EV crossover though, and a lot of that is because of the weight of the electric motors, where you do have this lower center of gravity, so you don't necessarily have this RAV4 like driving experience, but I wouldn't say that this feels like a sports crossover with a sports tuned suspension, because this suspension is tuned primarily for comfort and leisure, and you most certainly feel that. You don't hear the outside world at all. The interior insulation is top notch. Again, that kind of goes back to this car feeling like a Lexus, but also returning to that seat positioning, you also have the vision that you would have with a crossover. We have a nice panoramic view. A-pillars are super thin. Also, with your side mirrors, they are decently sized. I can see what's in my blind spots. But then, of course, with this car having a sedan-like design, you're going to have that smaller rear window, but I can see everything directly behind me. So it has this nice blend. It kind of feels like a Volvo S60 cross-country, but also, of course, the Subaru Outback sedan that came out 15, 20 years ago. And it's really great to see that Toyota is trying to revive this particular market, which is why I think we're seeing buyers hesitant to hop into this. But I think rather than looking at the Crown as being a replacement for the Avalon, this is something completely different. And it's something that I think is going to be appreciated years down the road. Maybe not right now in 2024, but it will be appreciated once we start seeing other manufacturers catch on. Because Toyota is right now unrivaled when it comes to the hybrid market. And now with the Crown and with the Crown Signia, you're going to have a luxury-like vehicle under $50,000 that Honda, Ford, GM, and also Kia and Hyundai, who don't have vehicles like this in their product lines. And since we're seeing buyers change their perceptions towards EVs, and their demands are changing as well, where they want hybrid and plug-in hybrid vehicles, I think we're going to see manufacturers hop into this segment. They're going to compete directly with the Crown and Crown Signia once that arrives at showrooms. So let's get on the highway here. Let's see what the Crown is made of with 236 horsepower. And unfortunately, we do have a decent amount of traffic. Well, you do have that CVT, and you hear that droning. What's really impressive is the electric propulsion. This has a lot of torque, relatively speaking, for a car of this weight and size. And the accelerations are pretty linear. Now, once again, you don't hear a lot of road noise, even with the larger tires. And also, it can get up to speed pretty quickly. You can pass slower drivers with ease. So I don't think you necessarily have to go with the Platinum. If you're somebody who wants to have a 5.5 0 to 60 time, go right ahead. But I think 7.2 is more than enough for a car like this. Now, also another thing too is that with the electric motors, with the weight of those electric motors, you definitely feel a lower center of gravity. You feel connected to the road. However, that doesn't translate to the suspension at all, because you do have a lot of body roll here. And that weight transfer isn't necessarily symmetrical. So when you are in the corners, you're definitely gonna be rolling a bit. And I think a lot of buyers and a lot of interested consumers look at this car and say, wow, the design is very sporty, very dynamic, but that's not what the Crown is all about. It's purely luxury. And that's what Toyota and Lexus have always done. They've never really leaned towards the sportier side of things with their models, with their vehicles, and the Crown is no different. And I don't think the Crown has to be that, because the Avalon wasn't that. I mean, sure, you had a V6, but no one was going out to buy an Avalon and track it. So with the Crown, what you have is a luxury car that is attainable, but also fuel efficient. But honestly, with all that said, I genuinely like this car. I like what it's offering. I like the fact that it feels upscale. And I also like the fact that it's not expensive, relatively speaking. To get a mid-trim, a limited, under $50,000, that's great. That is actually right in line with the average transaction price for a brand new vehicle. So I think pricing-wise, Toyota has really hit it out of the park with this car. I just think ultimately what it's going to boil down to is educating the consumer and letting them know that there's a vehicle like this out there that has the performance that they're looking for, but also has the refinement, technology, features, and that fuel efficiency that together make this car one heck of a value right now in an era where manufacturers have completely overlooked the hybrid market. So to wrap up my time with the Toyota Crown, what are my final thoughts and takeaways for what quite frankly is a mid-sized luxury hybrid sedan? In 2024, this is in a league of its own. You can't cross-shop it with anything else on the market right now. You can't cross-shop it with a Honda Accord hybrid or a Hyundai Sonata hybrid because the Camry hybrid is priced accordingly to go head-to-head with those two models. But also, the Crown isn't necessarily a direct competitor to a BMW 3 Series, Audi A4, or maybe even a Mercedes-Benz E-Class. It's also not a Toyota version of a Lexus ES, quite frankly, because even though it's built on the same platform, it's more modernized and it kind of feels more like a modern Lexus than the current ES in the Lexus lineup. This really is built and designed for a market that currently doesn't exist. And that's why patience needs to be exhibited not only from Toyota, but also consumers and journalists as well. Because journalists will say, well, this isn't selling at the same volumes that we're seeing with the Avalon, therefore it's a failure. Not necessarily. What Toyota needs now is Honda, Chevrolet, Ford, maybe even Hyundai and Kia to get into this market so that the Crown has a direct competitor. The Crown is a vehicle that is designed for 2030, but it's being sold in 2024. And I think that's why we're seeing a slight disconnect between the shopper and the manufacturer. I think Toyota has a vehicle that will do quite well once buyers understand this market and they also understand what this vehicle is giving you at $40,000 to $60,000. For a market that I think is now starting to warm up to hybrid and plug-in hybrid technology, this is the vehicle that will usher in that new era and usher in that new segment. And I do think, though, that once we start seeing the Crown nameplate expand with the Crown Signia, that's when other manufacturers are going to say, wait a minute, Toyota is building vehicles that are competitive. They have a better range than our EV products. They also have vehicles that feel luxury-like that our products are not offering to consumers. And I think that it's going to be the Signia, which will hopefully arrive sometime later this year, that will definitely get buyers into this vehicle and say, you know what, Toyota really has my best interest at heart, especially when it comes to the technology, the features, the layout, the driving experience. I think this is a vehicle that's totally worth the price of admission. And also, of course, just because of its range, that alone makes it very compelling and very enticing, especially now where we're looking for vehicles that are not fully gas-powered models, but we're also looking for alternatives to a full gas-powered powertrain. And that's what we have here with the Crown. So guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more. Also, make sure to follow me on Instagram at Boston Autoblog so you can see what I'm up to and what vehicles I'll be featuring in the future. And I will see you guys next time.